Welcome to Excel Boats on the X Podcast, powered by Mud Buddy Motors.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
The only podcast to bring you insights on the world of hunting, fishing, and boating. With your host, J. Paul Jackson.
You don't say much, do you?
Now, load up and sight in. This is On the X.
Welcome to the Excel Boats on the X Podcast, powered by Mud Buddy Motors. J. Paul Jackson here this week with, of course, Dave Reynolds, Excel Boats National Sales Director and co-host. How you doing, brother?
Doing great. How about you, J. Paul?
Doing good. Not duck hunting enough, but...
Yeah, I heard it's been pretty tough hunting there in Arkansas so far. I mean, everybody I've spoken to, with the exception, I think, of maybe Freddie King. But you know Freddie, man, he if there's any birds in the state, he'll find them. You know,
Freddie is kind of like the special forces of duck hunting. You know,
you're right. He is. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. He's definitely, the Special Forces, Navy SEAL, gets out there in the scuba gear, at night, and, he finds them if there's ducks in the state. But everywhere else, man, sounds like all the ducks are north of you, in addition to all the water you've been getting.
Yeah, man, over here in West Tennessee, the Mississippi River is so high and so big, and there's been so much rain. Every field has water in it. I mean, it is, so dispersed. I don't know whether we don't have the ducks down or they're here, but there's just so much water that they've got lots of places to go, so we're not getting in on them. But I know.
Right, it's bad then, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not been consistent here. And speaking of Special Forces, we've got a pretty interesting guest joining us today also. We're awful pleased to have Mr. Darren Jones with SilencerCo. Now, listeners out there that don't know what SilencerCo is, SilencerCo is one of the largest, if not the largest, manufacturer of suppressors or silencers, as they're often called, in the world. And they got a lot of cool products, including one that a duck ninja like Freddie really needs, the Salvo 12, a new suppressor that they came out with a couple of years ago for shotgun. So, Darren, welcome to the podcast, man. Glad to have you.
I appreciate y'all having me.
Yes, sir. Now, you're out in Texas, correct?
Yes, sir. I kind of split my time between San Antonio, deep South Texas, like right on the Mexican border, along the lower Laguna Madre and Baffin Bay. That's where I do a lot of my duck hunting. And then I also try to, when I get the opportunity, I try to get up here in East Texas and hunt the timber, like on the Sulphur River, Trinity River bottoms, places like that. Yeah,
that's pretty neat timber hunting there in that area of the world.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool up in this part. I was talking to a guy yesterday, and I was like, man, people that have never experienced timber, once, especially from a South Texas guy coming from the coast where it's flat and you can see for 100 miles in every direction, you get in the timber and don't know where the ducks are coming from, and then they get in that vortex and fall into a hole, and you have 100 plus, 100 to 200 mallards falling into a hole as big as your living room. For people that have never experienced that, waterfowl hunter wise, you have to go experience that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that there is green timber hunting and cypress breaks and stuff in East Texas. Did you know that, Dave?
Yeah, yep, I have heard of that. Yeah, in fact, that Dr. Duck, he was with Excel and Sitka for a while, and he's from that area and hunts a lot of timber. So, no, I was very surprised. You wouldn't think picture Texas is timber hunting, maybe cactus hunting, flooded cactus or something, but not timber. So, yep, I was very surprised. Now, Utah, on the other hand, there is absolutely no timber hunting here. Now, there might be some flooded willows, which you might be able to call pseudo timber hunting, but we definitely don't have anything out here. So I'm jealous. It is fun. I have done it in Arkansas, and it is pretty thrilling.
Yeah, you'd have to have trees first to have timber hunting. And
Yes, you do. We don't have trees, and secondly, we don't have water either. Yeah, we're in a drought here. So I'm jealous of all the water you've been getting, rain you've been getting in Arkansas.
Oh, we're supposed to get rain again Thursday. It's like 80, 90%.
Man, every time I talk to our rep, Bill Atkinson, well, we got another 4 inches last night. Supposed to get another 7 tomorrow. It's like, my gosh, it's hard to comprehend that much rain.
I don't understand it at all, man. The cycles that we've been through. I mean, in 2011, we had the greatest flood of the Mississippi River of all time. And then in February of 2016, we had the third biggest flood of all time. And then this year, we had another year that came into the top 20, and the river has been just up and down, up and down. I don't know what's going on, but, we've had a 500-year flood at least 3 times in the last decade. I don't know why they call it the 500-year flood, because it sure as hell isn't that here.
Yeah, no kidding.
How are water conditions out in Texas, Darren?
Well, it depends where you are in Texas. It's kind of a big place. It's East Texas is more like of your piney woods and hardwoods, like you would see in the deep South, like you would see in Arkansas. The Sulphur River that I've hunted before is and what they call the Arklatex, which is right up there in that Arkansas, Louisiana, kind of up in that top corner up towards Texarkana. And then they've had a good amount of rain up here. I've talked to guys on the Trinity. I've got a guy that I was talking to, runs Fowl Creek Outfitters down south of Dallas here, and he says they've got a lot of water up on the Trinity, and they've been shooting a lot of birds. But it's ebb and flow. Next cold front comes through, like this one that's going to come through tomorrow and dump rain on us tomorrow and y'all on Thursday. It's probably going to push in a few more birds. It'll probably kick some snow on some ice and some things up north, and then push them down. South Texas is in great shape right now, especially along the coast. The bad thing for us when that happens is when we have a lot of water along the Texas coast, it can push the ducks out.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to hold in one certain location, then they're going to be there. So guys that actually manage for ducks, like guys around the Houston area where there's just a ton of waterfowl in the Garwood Prairie, El Campo, Wharton, that area, that's just a powerhouse for duck hunting in Texas. That's the upper coast compared to us. That's a 4.5 hour drive from where I hunt. I hunt right down there south of Corpus Christi, and we've had a lot of rain down in the ranch country. The King Ranch, the Kennedy Ranch, the big ranches down there. And I was watching it this last weekend. We had a big group of pintails come in, and we took a couple of them out, and they just swam over, or they just flew over to the next little water hole inland, lit. And that was it. And then the next group would come in off the coast, and they do the same thing. And then they never had to get up. And if nobody's hunting them, if you guys are hunting on the bay, then it does keep the birds moving a little bit. But, they just don't have to move. There's so much food right now and so much water. They just don't have to get up. But there's plenty of birds. The birds are in good shape from what I can see.
And Dave, I think that's exactly what's going on here. I just think that we've got so much water, they don't have to move. So, I'm not convinced we don't have ducks down south. I think it's just all that water has them, dispersed. And if, particularly during the week, no hunting pressure, they don't have to get up and move. They got plenty of water, they got food, so they just hang out. So, people are assuming we don't have the ducks because they're not seeing them, but I'm not sure that that's the case.
Yeah, and then secondly, it's been warm there too, and I think when it is mild, they become pretty nocturnal too. A lot of them will feed and fly at night and rest during the day, so you don't see them, especially when they're spread thin.
I had this conversation over the weekend. I was hunting in the Boot Hill of Missouri, and we were talking about corn, and it was really, really mild, and we go in that morning, and we got up several thousand ducks out of the field that we were going to be hunting in. And, they got up, and we had ducks milling around us. We had greenheads lighting in the decoys at 5 minutes to shooting time. And then at 2 minutes to shooting time, I guess a bell rang somewhere telling them it was time to go, and they all left. And I was telling the guys, we just saw a ton of ducks. They're obviously here, but the bad thing about corn is if it's mild and they're not hurting, all it does is makes them nocturnal. You're not going to see them. To really successfully kill ducks down here in the corn, they've got to be hurting. It's got to be 25 degrees, lots of stuff frozen, weather threatening to get worse where they're trying to load up on those carbs. And if they're not hurting, they just go nocturnal.
Oh, sure. Especially when it's mild, they don't need as many calories. They could eat a little and they're good for the day. When it's cold, they're constantly eating. But mild weather, they don't need to eat much and they sleep a lot, and that makes for a tough combination.
Yeah.
Hey, Jay Paul, let me ask you a question. What do you think about how does the full moon play into a lot of that? Because I know I've had guys down here, some of the old timers say that, we've had some really knockout teal hunts in the early season on the full moon. Those teal will ride that full moon down all the way down. They'll fly all night and then rest down where we are. And they just, and then after that full moon, it's like we don't have any birds because they just pick up and keep moving with that moon further on down into Mexico or wherever they're going. And when it's not a full moon, it seems like a little bit more gradual progression. But when that full moon's on, it seems like it's a mad dash with birds following that moon.
See, and it's just the opposite for us here. We hate a full moon. I mean, most of the guys, I don't know anybody that I hunt with
I don't like
that likes a full moon because the ducks are even more nocturnal. I don't think they continue moving on us with the full moon so much as they don't, they've got plenty of light at night. I think they, go out and they feed all night in the moonlight. And then in the day they go and loaf and they rest. And in the fields, it's terrible on a full moon. So we hate it down here. It's the opposite of a mad dash here. It's like, oh crap, it's going to be a full moon this weekend. I'm going to go deer hunting, because the ducks just aren't going to work.
Yeah, it's similar in Utah too. I mean, the only benefit of a full moon is, you don't need headlamps to put out your decoys in the morning. It's pretty bright. But other than that, yeah, it makes for very, very tough hunting. But, my philosophy is best time to go hunting is whenever you can. So, if it's a full moon, I'm still going to hunt and try. I don't have the luxury of being able to go every day and picking my day. So I go when I can. And, I've noticed too, sometimes on the full moon, the better hunting is later in the afternoon.
No doubt about that.
Because they have fed all night and, the morning's dead. But, a little later afternoon, they'll start to move around in a little. So I just have to stay out there long enough.
Same with deer hunting, especially down here in South Texas during the rut. Same thing. Sometimes you won't see anything moving in the afternoon, but if you have that moon over major in the afternoon, and deer are out moving around, between 12 and 2, going crazy.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody else is back at camp taking a nap. If you can get out and rattle some horns, you're gonna see something pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same with the ducks out here in the marsh. Everybody goes out for a couple hours, and this sucks. We're going home, and you get out in the afternoon and you have pretty good action in the marshes to yourself. But
yeah.
So Darren, tell me a little about your product. Do you use a product for waterfowl hunting?
Absolutely. We came up with the Salvo around three and a half years ago. John Schultz, one of our founders, Jonathan Schultz, we kind of just did it as an off thing. He's like, well, let's start throwing around some new product ideas. And we're like, what about a shotgun suppressor? And he's like, actually, I've been working on one, because he went on a duck hunt with a friend of his in Oklahoma, and he was in a duck blind. And as y'all know, in a duck blind, it can get, if you're in the timber, you're spread out. If you're in layout blinds, you're a little bit more spread out sometimes. But in a blind, if there's 3 or 4 of y'all packed into a blind, it can get loud. And few shots are fired off, and he was just wearing like some foam earplugs, and he's like, this is ridiculous. And he got out of the blind and left. It was so loud. And he's not like a hardcore duck hunter. He was just going to like, hey, I'm going to go on a duck hunt, and wanted to go see what it was all about. And he's like, this is ridiculous. So we've got to figure something out here. So he's just started drawing some stuff up and just drawing some concepts up, and when we finally brought the idea to him, like, hey, look, this is something that we see some use cases here. Not everybody wakes up every day saying, I need a shotgun suppressor. But for everybody that I've shown it to, mostly duck hunters and turkey hunters, I've only had, I can say I haven't had anybody, but I've only had a very few people say, yeah, I just don't like it. Most of the guys that shoot it, the first couple of times they shoot it, they're like, this is just different having this weight on the end of the gun. But it absolutely helps with that ringing that you get sometimes when you have somebody take a high shot in a blind, or None of us like for it to happen, but sometimes people will shoot across you on a blind, and that's when you really get wrong. And the guys that I've really talked to that like it are the guides, the guys that are sitting there calling. When you're shooting, you don't really notice it, but when you're standing next to somebody and they torch off a 3-inch mag, number 4, and it's that's a loud shot. And most of the guys that have been around it and listened to it and been in a blind have liked it. Guys that I've hunted with down in around Houston. I was on a duck lease a couple of years ago with some guys, and I took them into the blind. And I was like, hey, I just want everybody to try this. I said, if you don't like it, you don't like it, but I want everybody in the blind to shoot one. And my friend Brian Osteen down there in Houston, he did it as well. And guys ended up ordering salvos because they're like, man, this is really nice. If everybody's shooting one of these in the blind, it is really enjoyable. You don't have to worry about wearing any kind of hearing protection or wearing the muffs and amplify sound, because as a duck hunter, everybody knows a duck hunter and turkey hunting, you have to be able to hear. I lost a good portion of my hearing overseas, and I lost the other portion of it to like Loud Machinery and Metallica. So yeah, I've got like 30% hearing in my left ear, and about 50% in my right ear. And you think with these big old ears, I'd be able to hear, but I can't. So I usually wear hearing aids, and they're actually getting repaired right now because they don't do real well when they get water on them. So I'm a big believer, not just because I work for a suppressor company, but I'm just a big believer in the technology. And the salvo makes a lot of sense in certain situations. Not every situation is going to dictate, having the, having a can on the end of your shotgun. But for duck hunting and turkey hunting, especially where you're shooting magnum loads and you're getting, you're burning a lot of powder, it's really nice. And it reduces some of the recoil as well, like most suppressors do reduce recoil. So there's
okay. So greatly reduces the decibels. Then how much does it? How many decibels does it take it down to then typically?
Well, to go into that, the salvo comes in the package, and it's a foot long. Okay, so it's a 12-inch can. Now it's modular. So you can take it apart and you can shorten it. Now the way I tell guys, I'm like, if you're going to run a 12-inch can, run a 22-inch barrel, because a 12-inch can is like 34 ounces. That's a lot. For hunting, if I'm shooting, like I'll shoot a Super Black Eagle, an M2, and a Vinci. I also shoot a Versamax. I shoot all different kinds of shotguns when I hunt. It just depends what I reach in and grab that day. And if I'm shooting a longer barrel, like a 28-inch barrel or a 30-inch barrel, I'll run a 6-inch or an 8-inch suppressor. If I'm running my 22-inch barrel gun that I have on my M2, which I use for turkey hunting, I'll use it for timber hunting and things like that, where I'm taking some closer in shots. I'll run that shorter barrel, and I'll run an 8-inch or a 10-inch on that to get a little bit more sound suppression. So to answer your question, of course, the larger suppressor is going to have it in that 138, 139, which is that threshold that OSHA says that anything over 140 decibels of impulse noise is going to cause hearing damage. Okay, if you're exposed to 140 or more on the dB level, you're going to experience some kind of hearing damage if you're exposed to that impulse noise over a certain amount of time. So the vast majority of our suppressors are going to get, especially on the rifle side, down into like that 135, 136 range, depending on the caliber and atmospherics and everything else. But on the salvo, the 12-inch can is going to knock it down to, I believe it's about 138, somewhere in there, it's right on the level. And if I'm running a 6-inch on a 30-inch barrel at the ear, it's going to be about the same because it's further away from you. Okay. If I'm running a 6-inch can on a 22-inch barrel, it's going to be louder because it's closer to me at the ear. And you can get into the whole at the ear, at the muzzle, all those kind of different measurements that are taken. But most of the guys that I hunt with run either the 6-inch or the 8-inch because they're running factory barrels, and which, they're, when they buy a shotgun, they don't want to buy 9 different barrels for it. That's why we have choke tubes, right? So most guys are running, most of the guys I hunt with shoot Browning, Benelli, Beretta. Have a few, sprinkling of guys that shoot the Versa Maxes, and almost everybody is running either a 26 or a 28. And I don't know about y'all. I mean, I would be interested to hear what a lot of different guys run, but that's what most of them run. So they buy the rod kit for the Salvo. We have 6, 8, 10, and of course it comes as a 12. And I've had some guys that they'll stick that 12 on there because they're like, man, I don't like the bark, and I'll deal with the weight because I'm in a blind. I'm not having to hump it everywhere. And they get used to it. I don't.
Sure. Well, I guess that's something you have to take out to the skeet trap range, obviously before season, and
Sure.
get used to the different balance and the weight, barrel weight.
Yeah.
Is it, what I know what people think of suppressors, silencers. Many people think, oh man, that's illegal. These are obviously approved in every state. I know many hunters will think that, oh man, I could shoot after hours with a suppressor. That thing's not going to make any noise. But contrary, so clear up the misunderstanding about silencer suppressors as far as legality in every state.
Right. Well, they're not legal in every state.
Okay.
Right now, you can. We have. California, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island.
California? I can't believe California
Yeah,
there.
believe it or
Legal.
not.
Kidding?
Yeah, believe it or not.
We can't even sell mud buddies in California, believe me.
You know what? It's sad to me because California has some great people and some really great hunting in California. I mean, fantastic.
Oh yeah, I lived there for a while. Yeah, believe me, people who buy Mud Buddy motors have to drive to Nevada to pick up their motors. We cannot ship to California.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
And New York.
So, sorry to interrupt. California, New York.
California, New York, Massachusetts.
What about Illinois?
A lot of your New England states are out there. There are let's see, Hawaii can own a suppressor in Hawaii. And there's actually some decent hunting in Hawaii as well. I don't know about on the waterfowl side, but for like pigs and axis deer and turkeys and things like that.
What about in Illinois?
Illinois can't own one in Illinois.
The state of Chicago, you can't own one.
You can't own one in the state of Chicago. It's got kind of like the state of New York. I ran into some guys deer hunting in Alaska, and I asked them, I said, hey, where are you guys from? We were sitting in a field watching mallards land in a dry field, which I'd never seen before. And so I was sitting there watching it, just in awe, watching these mallards pile into this corn pivot. And I was talking to these guys that were down hunting with a friend of mine, deer hunting. I'm like, where are you guys from? They're like, we're from New York State. I'm like, oh. And they're like, yeah, we're not from New York City. So we're from the actual state of New York. And they were very quick to point that out. Nothing against guys from New York City because I've got a lot of friends that live there and they hunt, but they have to, New York's another place that has fantastic sporting opportunities as well, and a lot of really great people that are just governed by a very small percentage of their state is actually the big voting block, which is the large urban areas. So kind of like Chicago and California or Illinois and California and all those other places. But so on the legality thing, the way I always say is just always double check. Talk to a game warden. There's some great resources out there. The American Suppressor Association is one of them, and you can go on their website and check and say what states are legal for hunting, and they have a page there saying you can have one, you can own one here, because some states you can own one and you can't hunt with one.
What?
Yeah, you can own one but you can't hunt with one. There's been a couple of states like that that were, yes, you can own one but you can't hunt with one. Iowa recently turned over and said yes to all of it, to suppressor ownership and to hunting, which is great, because I know a lot of guys in Iowa that some really good duck hunting up in Iowa as well. There's a few states out there that you can own but you can't hunt. I believe, don't quote me on this, I should know this, but off the cuff, I believe it's without looking it up, I believe it's either Vermont, or it's one of those, Vermont or Connecticut up there, where you can't you can own one, but you can't hunt with one. I think it's Vermont. So, and they're working really hard to try to get that passed, because there's a lot of good opportunities up there as well. And a lot of this comes down to education, and we've tried really hard as an industry, not just SilencerCo, but a lot of our other people that are in the suppressor business, Dead Air, SIG, Rugged, a lot of the other really good top quality suppressor manufacturers out there have really, gone out of their way to try to educate people that, hey, where these are legal, you can hunt with them, and you should use one. And even here in Texas, where they've been all about hunting with suppressors for a while, it's and suppressor ownership. There's a lot of people I still run into. They're like, I didn't know these were legal. And I'm like, yeah, they've always been legal. You just always had to pay a tax stamp to own one. And that's where, that's the discouraging part of owning a suppressor, is if you want a suppressor for next year to use next season, you're probably going to have to order it here within the next 3 to 4 months if you want to have it in time to start hunting with it.
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point that I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about. I know a lot of guys don't own a suppressor, not because they think it's illegal. They'd like to have one. They just don't understand the process if you want to buy a suppressor. So let's say that today I wanted to buy a SilencerCo suppressor off of your website. What's the procedure that a guy needs to go through to buy one?
Well, first of all, we sell to, we have two-step distribution. We sell to our distributors, and then our distributors sell to the dealers. And so if you're on our website or talking to somebody, say, man, I really want to buy a Salvo 12 to duck hunt with. Like, okay, first of all, you're going to have to find a store in your area that it's not just an FFL. Not every gun store sells suppressors. They have to have their class, basically, for lack of a better term, their class 3 license, which is called an SOT. It's a special occupational tax stamp. And it's just another license that gun stores have to carry in order to sell short barrel rifles and destructive devices, they call it, which is suppressors. So you have to, first of all, you have to find somebody that deals in suppressors. And secondly, you will go in, and there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can buy it on a trust, or you can buy it as an individual. Now, a lot of guys here lately have been buying it as an individual because they get them back faster. And when people ask me why should I do a trust, and here's why you want to do a trust. If like, say if J. Paul, say you and I were on the same trust, okay, and I went in and bought a suppressor, I would need, when you go in to buy a suppressor, you have to have 2 sets of fingerprint cards, the FBI form fingerprint cards that you can get done. And Silencer Shop, the company Silencer Shop, makes this very easy, because some of their dealers have this kiosk in there where you can go in and do your fingerprints and take your pictures right there, and it's super easy. Or you can go to Walgreens and get your photo made, and like you do for a passport, get your fingerprints made, go in and you fill out your paperwork and buy your suppressor, and then they bag all that up. You write a $200 check to the ATF, and then they send all that in, and then you wait. And right now, the wait time, and hats off to the ATF, I think they're actually trying as good as they can. They're trying to, because it's one of those things, they're making money off of this. So let's go back to the paperwork. I don't want to get off on down a rabbit hole.
No, but hang on for a second. Let's don't go down a rabbit hole, but I do want to point out something, and I want your take on this, since you just mentioned it, and then we'll go back to paperwork. I've heard a lot of people say, the $200 tax stamp, the government does that because they want to discourage suppressor ownership. And I don't buy into that at all, because they're making money off of it. I think that they are trying to get those lead times down, because, hey, the more tax stamps they sell at $200 a pop, the more money the ATF makes. It would be idiotic for them to be against it. It's just a government regulation that says it's going to be $200, but the ATF's not doing it to deter people, are they? I mean, it's a money-making deal. It seems to me like they're trying to speed it up so they can do more.
It's a money-making deal now. back in 1934, I don't think it was a money-making operation. I think they put that high tax stamp on there to discourage people. Now that you have record numbers of people seeing the benefits of suppressors and going in and buying suppressors, I know a lot of guys are like, look, I don't like paying a tax stamp. I don't like paying an extra $200 per item. But guys I know that are really into shooting suppressors, they're like, that's just part of the cost of getting one.
Cost of doing business.
And
it's a one-time deal too.
Well, yeah, for that item. So like if you're going to buy 3 suppressors, you're going to write 3 checks for $200. So it's part of the cost of doing business now. I don't agree with it, but it's the world we live in. I want to be able to own one. So I'm going to pay the tax and be legal. I'm not going to break the law. And I'm just going to do what I have to do until we can either have them taken off the NFA or we make it easier for guys to get them. And I think the more that we educate people in Washington and educate our legislators, which is another thing that American Suppressor Association is trying to do. I've been on shoots with members of Congress, members of the House. And they shoot them and they're like, oh wow, this isn't silent. I'm like, yeah, you're shooting a supersonic bullet through it. It's going to be loud. It's just not going to split your eardrums every time you shoot it. And they're like, oh, well, that makes total sense. So, and that's, and that is a very slow route step type movement there. So that's, as far if they're trying to make money or not, I don't know.
Well, what I'm saying is, I don't think it's a deterrent thing. I think the ATF, I mean, we've watched lead times go down. So to go back to the paperwork, and kind of encapsulate. So a guy goes to a FFL that also has the SOT, and if they have the Silencer Shop kiosk, then they can do all their paperwork right there in the kiosk. They pay their $200 for the stamp. My understanding is with the kiosks now, if you do it individually, lead times can be down as short as 4 months. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Some guys are getting their stuff in 4 to 5 months. I've had one of my friends said, man, I did it on an individual and boom, I had it in 4 months, and with the trust and going back to the trust, the reason why you do a trust. So if you and I are on that trust and you have you're carrying your trust paperwork with you, that makes it where you can have that item that, we have all of our, say we have 4 suppressors on that list and we have those 4 serial numbers listed. If you're stopped by a, federal agent, like a U.S. Fish and Wildlife guy, or even a state agent, and he says, hey, let me see your paperwork. You pull out your trust and say, see, here's the serial number. Here it is on the trust. I can legally have this suppressor with me. And they say, have a nice day. And that's it. I've only been asked once for my paperwork, and he was just doing his due diligence, and he's well within his right to do that as an officer of the law, and I don't argue with him. I just I'm legal. I buy a hunting license, I buy duck stamps, I carry my paperwork with me, and I believe 99% of hunters out there that go out and buy a license and buy guns and spend money in the industry are going to do things legally, because it's just not worth taking a shortcut.
So a couple of things came out of that. Number one, if I'm an individual and I've just done it as an individual, and Dave wants to try out my Salvo 12, I can't just say, well, here, you can borrow it, and him take off with it on his own. I can let him use it as long as I'm there with him physically in his presence. But in the absence of a trust, if I've got it individually, no one can have that suppressor without me being present, correct?
Without you being within their jurisdiction. Yes.
Second thing. Second takeoff. Now, if I understand it correctly, if I really want to get my suppressor quickly, I want to go in, do it preferably at a kiosk, do it as an individual, but I can add that suppressor. I can establish a trust after the fact, correct?
Yes, you can. You can establish it after the fact, but then you're going to have to go in, and whoever you're adding to that trust is going to have to wait until their paperwork is cleared.
Hey, but if it gets it in my hands faster, I'm okay with making Dave wait before he can use it. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay, man.
And that's what makes it so hard. And that's the barrier to entry that we talk about with a lot of guys. There's a small faction of people out there that are just like, I am not giving the government $200. And I'm like, okay, man, whatever, it's like, or I have a lot of the people here lately is what has slowed a lot of suppressor sales down is people saying, well, I'm going to wait for that bill to pass.
Oh, that is.
And after the Vegas shooting was absolutely one of the most horrible things to ever happen in the history of our nation, in my opinion. The massacre that happened there, and it was absolutely horrific. And I know people that were there in the crowd, and it was a really a black mark on our history. However, suppressors had nothing to do with that, and for all of the work and the legislation that was pending, because it had already passed the House, it was going to the Senate. The Share Act that was going through, and the Sportsman's Act that was going through, was going to put it up to have suppressors taking off of the National Firearms Act. And they were pushing to take away the tax stamp and for them to be sold just as an accessory, where you would still have to go through, fill out a 4473, just like you do when you buy a firearm, just like you do when you buy a rifle or a pistol or anything else that shoots a bullet. You still got to go and fill out the paperwork. So we want to just make it where it'd be easier for people to get them, because in foreign countries, if you've ever hunted in South Africa or New Zealand and parts of Europe, I talked to the guys with Sako rifles at SHOT Show last year, and they were over. We had a couple of Tikas with suppressors on them, and guys were shooting them, and they're like, "Oh man, it's so great." We don't even like going down on the rifle line because we're not walking around with hearing protection on, or we don't ever wear hearing protection, because in Finland you are almost required to have a suppressor. If you're on a range and everybody is shooting suppressed and you're not, then you're told to either wait or go get a suppressor put on your rifle.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's completely polar opposite. South Africa, a lot of guys are shooting cans, and a lot of the guys over there. I was at Dallas Safari Club show 2 years ago, and a kid came up to me. He goes, "Oh yeah, we make these in our shop at our house, to put on our rifles." And he started, he drew out on a piece of paper, the kind of his design, and I was like, "Man, that's pretty awesome. Is it quiet?" He goes, "Yeah, it's real quiet." And it really knocks the recoil off, and it does. On a rifle, like on a 300 Win Mag, you're going to knock off over 50% of recoil on a 300 Win Mag. And if you shoot a lightweight, like I've got a Kimber lightweight 300 Win Mag and a 300 WSM, and I tell you what, shooting it without a can is just not pleasant at all.
Yeah, even with the brake, there's a huge difference between what the can does over the brake. I know I have a 300 Win Mag, and it's shooting it without a brake. It's like being punched. It's a lightweight one. It's a Tikka T3, and shooting it without a brake, it's like getting punched by Mike Tyson in the shoulder. Shooting it with a brake, it's much more manageable. I've put my buddy's can on it. It's nothing. I mean, it's like shooting my 243,
Yep.
I mean, it is very, very, so there's a lot of, pluses. And talking about weight, and even going back to the salvo, I mean, what is an 8-inch salvo weigh, the shotgun suppressor?
That I don't know.
What is a 12-inch weigh?
The 12-inch weighs 34 ounces. So, an 8-inch is probably going to weigh, somewhere in that, I would say somewhere in that 16-ounce category. It's still some considerable weight. It's not anything you can't get used to. And again, I think what a lot of guys do is they get the 12-inch and they either don't know that we sell a rod kit, or they're like, well, I'm not buying a rod kit because I don't want to spend money on it. And they put a 12-inch suppressor on the end of a 28-inch barrel or a 30-inch barrel. And they're like, this is ridiculous. Now I've got a, 42-inch barrel, sticking out, and it's really hard to manage. When you come up out of the blind, your shot, you'll dip, with that weight on the end, you'll dip before you take your shot and have to recover. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to put that big long can on the end of on the end of a long barrel. It's just not enjoyable. But going back to the dB reduction real quick, it's not just the decibel reduction that is the huge benefit. The bones in your ear get rattled by that overpressure, by that shock wave. When you torch that gun off, it's basically a small explosion going off in front of your rifle or your shotgun. And you can see it when you shoot in low light. You can see the flame shooting out at the end of a shotgun barrel sometimes.
Dave sees that all the time.
Yeah. So but it keeps the bone in your ear from getting rattled. And that is the one thing that plugs or muffs really don't mitigate that well, is the overpressure and shockwave coming from that barrel. You just can't mitigate that with anything but a suppressor. It's just like running a car without a muffler. It's offensive.
Yeah.
If we had to have licenses to have mufflers on cars, which we do, it's a public nuisance if you're running a car. I mean, go to a drag strip.
Dave and I know all about noise and public nuisance and mufflers. I mean, not in regard to cars, in regard to Mud Buddy Motors. I mean, and it's something that we work. It's been a topic several times here on this podcast over the last year, because it's been a big point of contention in Arkansas. And it amazes me, people, will raise 9 kinds of hell about a car being too loud, or somebody driving down the road with their music too loud, or about their mud motor being too loud. But then, they make it so dang difficult for us to control the noise on our firearms, which are way more damaging to our ears than, any of the other previously mentioned things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's just more and more awareness to, all types of noise pollution.
Amen. Well, last thing I got for you too, because I know you've got to go here in a second. Let's go back to purchasing. So I go in, I go to my local SOT, I do it at the kiosk, I pay my $200, I pay for my suppressor, but I don't walk out of the store with my suppressor that day, do I?
No, that is where your wait time starts. And whether you use a kiosk from Silencer Shop, or you just go in and fill out your paperwork with your 2 passport photographs and your 2 sets of fingerprint cards. When you submit all of that paperwork and you fill out the responsible person form and you fill out your 4473 and you fill out all the forms that you have to fill out, they're going to take all that plus your check that you write to the ATF. Some guys pay it on a credit card, and I don't do that. I write a check because I want to see when they cash it, because that's usually when you can start the clock. You can usually start the clock when they cash the check, saying, okay, I know that on December 18th that they cashed the check. So that's when you can start the clock, saying, okay, 4, 6, 8 months, 9 months, I'm going to get this back.
Cool.
So, that's how it all starts. And everybody that I know that shoots a suppressor, regardless of their socioeconomic level or whatever, that has gotten into shooting a suppressor, they're like tattoos. You just don't get one. You're going to have several.
Yeah.
And I'm a prime example of that. I had one on my gun when I first started working for the company. I just got a couple, and I had some guys hunting with me, and they're like, I brought guns. I'm like, hey, I only got a couple with suppressors on it. And, my daughter is like, well, I'm not going to shoot anything that's not suppressed. She just won't do it. She's like, I'm not shooting an unsuppressed gun. I'll just go with you and sit in the blind, because I don't want to be around that thing going off. I don't like it. It hurts my ears. Even when I plug them, I don't like it. And the recoil reduction is a huge thing too. So yeah, it's once you buy one, it's I always tell guys, if you're going to spend the time and do the paperwork and the fingerprints and all that, save your money and get a couple of them, because for the time that it takes, I've had guys that they'll wait all that time, they'll get the suppressor and they'll shoot it, and they'll be like, oh man, I should have got one for my other rifle, because now my sons are fighting over who's going to shoot the suppressed gun, or I just bought one, and I can think of several other applications where I can have a suppressor on another gun, or I should have got a Salvo, or I should have got a 22 when I got my rifle suppressor. And that's usually the progression that we see guys go down. You know, once they start shooting suppressed, they don't go back.
I know for me, it was that way. I mean,
Hmm.
go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
No, I just thought of another market. I don't know if you've approached the gun manufacturers, but I used to work at Browning, and I tell you, these endurance tests on new rifles and shotguns are brutal. Shooting boxes and boxes and boxes of ammo. The recoil and the noise. You guys need to target some gun manufacturers. They'd probably jump on that. When I worked at Browning, many of the older employees were there before the days of any hearing protection. Where hearing protection wasn't cool. And needless to say, many of those guys are very, very hard of hearing. So, noise awareness, in shooting has gone a long ways.
No doubt.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it absolutely has. And I talked to Rafe over at Browning because I got one of the Hell's Canyon 6.5 Hell's Canyon guns, which is awesome. I love that gun. And when I go out and on hunts and take it to demos and let people shoot it, I know personally I've sold about 3 of them to different guys because they've shot that rifle and they're just like, oh my God, this rifle is amazing. And then they call me when they get it and they're like, hey, this thing isn't threaded in .528 or a standard thread pitch. I'm like, yeah, Browning's working on that. And I believe Browning is working on that, on getting them when they get them from the factory where they're not threaded in that metric thread pattern. They're threaded in either .528 or 5/8 24. I've been told that Browning is working on that. So I hope that they are. On the rifle side. On the shotgun side, with the Salvo, when you buy the can, you don't get a choke with it because we don't know what kind of shotgun you shoot. So we sell a pack of chokes for either we have Browning and Vector, Benelli Cryo, Benelli Mobile, Remington Pro Bore, the regular Remington chokes. We have Mossberg. We have adapters if guys are running them on the tactical shotguns, like for a Saiga or something like that. And for the Winchester stuff, you can still run I believe on the Winchester guns, you can run the Browning chokes, if I'm not mistaken.
It is. Yeah, the Winchester Browning.
Yeah, they're interchangeable.
Well, I'll tell you, for guys out there listening, if you're wondering about them, I'm going to warn you now. I mean, in my experience, personally, I've got a couple of buddies that have had suppressors for a little while. And after hunting with them and, the first time that I went out with a guy and shot a centerfire rifle that was suppressed, I was done for. I mean, I was ruined then. I knew right then, okay, I've got to have one of these, because if you're on the fence about, is this something that I'd like, you need to get with a buddy that's got one and try it. I guarantee you it's going to push you over the edge. Like you were saying about your daughter, she won't even hunt now without having a gun suppressed. Unfortunately, I'm playing the waiting game. So it's going to be a while before I have one still, but everybody has to, when you first buy it, go through that wait time. And that's the worst part about it. I shot one, I went, dang, I got to have one of these, but you can't just go to the store and walk out with it. But man, you guys have, I've seen the Chimera, the Omega 300, the Saker 5.56, and even the 5.56K, which is really nice and lightweight, provides great reduction in sound, just unbelievably well machined. Basically, your suppressors are works of art, and you guys are doing a great job. If you're out there and you're interested in checking out the product, you can go to SilencerCo.com and check them out. Full line of suppressors, some really, really great stuff out there. And guys, I'm sorry, we're just about out of time here, but Darren, man, it's been great having you today. Have you learned a little bit, Dave?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. That was very interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, guys. And I guess the next step for us is to get together and go kill some birds. Cause I'm itching right now. The sun's out and I know tomorrow it's going to be hazy and nasty. And I'm going to really do my best to get on the water in the next couple of days and see if I can't knock down a few birds. Cause I'm ready to go out and put some birds down.
Yes, sir. And I'm ready to see you come.
Well, good luck.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it.
I'm ready to have you here in January too. We're going to get on them somewhere here in Tennessee or Arkansas. I promise you. And hopefully it's going to overlap with the time that Dave's in town too. Well, guys, that's it for time today. But thanks again, Darren. Darren Jones, Marketing Director for SilencerCo. Really enjoyed having you today. And for all you guys out there listening, thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Excel Boats on the X podcast, powered by my buddy Mo.